Welcome to Chit Chatter with Rhea, the podcast that provides information to you about the legal and political process. Now here's your host, Rhea Chattergoon.
Hey guys, welcome back to Chit Chatter. I know we took a little break in November, partly because I had all of these episodes in the vault that I needed to release, and in part because November is generally just not a great month for me. I think I mentioned in episode 4 or 5 that my daughter had passed away on Thanksgiving Day. But even before that, I just generally always disliked Thanksgiving. I remember when I first moved to the United States, my dad explained to us, what Thanksgiving was and why it was celebrated. And I'm talking about the real story, not the celebrated marketing story that's told. And I remember saying to my dad, like, why would anybody ever celebrate this? This is just horrific. And I've always felt that way. I understand the holiday has now, sort of changed into a day of being more grateful and doesn't necessarily celebrate the stealing of land from the American Indians. But it's just not a holiday I've liked. We usually try not to be in town for the holiday, but we're planning construction on our house, and we thought it would have started before Thanksgiving. It didn't want to be away while that was happening, but of course it hasn't started because I live in South Florida, and good luck trying to get a contractor to do anything on time down here. So that actually hasn't started, and we ended up staying here, but it turned out fine. I survived. Since then, and actually even right before Thanksgiving, a lot has been happening. It's certainly turning into a December to remember for sure. So let's talk about it. What's been happening? Well, this week, I think the major thing that we should discuss is the passing of the Respect for Marriage Act. So that act would repeal the Defense of Marriage Act, which denied federal benefits to same-sex couples. The push for legislation for the Respect for Marriage Act started over the summer after Justice Clarence Thomas suggested in his opinion in the Dobbs case that, this constitutional right, these cases that establish constitutional rights based on the Due Process Clause should be reconsidered. And so one of those would be marriage. Specifically, the decision in Obergefell versus Hodges, which, and I hope I'm pronouncing that right, which allowed same-sex marriage in 2015. So there was a strong indication that those particular decisions could be overturned by the Supreme Court based on the premises established in the Dobbs decision. So the Senate moved to pass this Respect for Marriage Act. I would say Congress did. But, and so what does it do? The Respect for Marriage Act ensures federal recognition of marriage, regardless of sex, race, ethnicity, national origin, religion, etc. And it requires all states to recognize valid marriages conducted in places where it's illegal. Now, what it doesn't do, and I want everybody to be clear about this because this is not a perfect bill, it doesn't require the 50 states to allow same-sex marriage as held under that Hodges decision, right? So it doesn't prohibit states from taking steps to ban or restrict same-sex marriages if Hodges were overturned. And so let's talk a little bit about the Hodges case. In that case, the court held that the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment guaranteed the right to marry as one of the fundamental liberties that the Due Process Clause protects, and that it applied to same-sex couples in the same way it would to heterosexual couples. And so that precedent held that the right to marriage is a fundamental liberty because it's inherent to the concept of individual autonomy, right? It protects the most intimate association between two people. It safeguards children and families, because they're then given legal recognition to buy a house, to raise children, to, receive benefits. And so that case said that there was no difference between a same-sex union and an opposite sex union. I mean, if you remember in 2015, the White House lit up in rainbow colors. It was a big deal. I remember a few of my neighbors who are same-sex couples standing outside their house crying, because here they were being recognized by their government. Why am I getting choked up about that? Oh my gosh, so weird. But I do feel very strongly about that, right? Like I don't think everybody should be able to love who they love. I never will understand. I'll never understand it. And listen, I have family members who speak very derogatory about same-sex couples, and they are not approving, quote unquote, of it. And I just always say, who are you to approve of who somebody loves? Or like, why are people so invested in who somebody's sleeping with? I don't care. You know what? My same-sex neighbors keep their houses pristine. They are friendly. They bring us wine at Christmas. They celebrate Liam's birthday. They're no different. And to me, this continuous push to regulate people and have control over individuals is just, it's disgusting to me. And I hopefully we're getting to a place where, now with this Respect to Marriage Act, we can start to progress in this country. But again, going back to there is nothing in the act that's going to require states to allow same-sex marriage. Also, let me also point out that there was a provision in the act that, in order to get some Republican backers to vote, because this did require a 60+ vote, and I think the vote was 61 to 36. It's not requiring religious organizations to provide goods or services for the celebration of any marriage, of same-sex marriage. It wouldn't allow them to lose their tax-exempt status if they refused other benefits, for refusing to recognize the same-sex unions. So there was language added there that the bill also does not recognize or require the federal government to recognize polygamous marriages. So for all my poly people out there, this act does not protect you. Okay. So listen, no bill, no act, nothing is ever perfect. There will always be give and take. I get irritated with it as well. But in order to get that 60+ votes, it's what the Dems had to do. Did they really have to do it? Could they make these people look bad? Sure. But, listen, they're trying to push this bill before they lose or potentially lose power in January in the House. So now the act is headed back to the House, and then President Biden is expected to sign it into law. Now, this Respect for Marriage Act comes on the heels of the mass shooting. Which one, Rhea? Because there's so many. Yes, there's so many. But, the shooting in Colorado at the nightclub where 5 people were killed and about 17 people, I think, were injured. So, they, meaning Congress, was just hoping to get this done before the end of the year. I was hoping for an abortion bill, but the problem is they're not going to get the 60+ votes to pass it. And so we're waiting. Speaking of waiting, there is a runoff between Reverend Warnock and most likely to be a werewolf, Herschel Walker. I mean, honestly, I can't even believe this runoff is happening. It just looks like a bad parody, right? I feel so badly for Reverend Warnock, because, like, this is your competition. you're looking at Herschel Walker thinking, why is this even a choice? Because that's what I'm saying. And for someone as accomplished as Reverend Warnock, I mean, he's got to feel that, right? Listen, as a trial lawyer, I will tell you, there are cases where your opposing counsel is not the best, and you know you are the better lawyer. But the facts of the case, the particular judge in charge, on your case, may do things that allow that particular opposing counsel to win even at trial. It's happened to me. And you're thinking to yourself, I know I'm a better lawyer, right? And that's not to be conceited. I think everybody has it in their industry, but you're thinking, God, I lost to this person? I mean, I have lost to attorneys who I think I'm better than. And maybe somebody will say, well, maybe you're not because you lost to them. But listen, there's so many aspects that go into a loss or, a competition. And in this case, Reverend Warnock is dealing with a sect of the population that is just racist, and I say they're racist because they're willing to put this unqualified person in a race. I mean, he's completely unqualified. He cannot string a sentence together. There's nowhere this man is mentally fit to serve in the Senate. But because he's a black man, they thought they could put Herschel Walker up there, who, by the way, we just found out doesn't even reside in Georgia. I'm not sure how that got missed or why the Democrats haven't pushed that to even get him disqualified. I don't know the law in Georgia. I welcome one of my lawyer friends to educate me on that little issue there. President Obama was in Georgia yesterday doing, a closing push for Reverend Warnock, and he was joking about the werewolf joke as well. But I love him. I love President Obama. I don't care if you disagree with me. I miss him. I miss his even keelness. I miss how smart he is. I miss all of that in the White House. Not that President Biden isn't doing a good job, because, man, his record right now it's killing it. It's killing it. But we do need Reverend Warnock in the Senate so that we don't have to rely on flip-flopper Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema. But I won't get into that because that just drives me crazy. Voting day in Georgia is December 6th. I believe that will be tomorrow by the time this airs. So if you did not vote in early voting Georgia, please get out there. There's been actual record numbers of early voting. So really happy to see that. What else is going on? So a few weeks ago, there was a report that came out about leaked opinions for the Supreme Court and the unfettered access that certain wealthy people had to the justices of the Supreme Court. If you recall, there was a leak of Dobbs. There was a claim that there would be an investigation, but we never heard anything about that investigation, right? I have a conspiracy theory that Dobbs was leaked in March, in order to prepare the United States for the decision that was later coming down. That's my conspiracy theory. I have nothing to back it up. But we haven't heard anything about this apparent investigation. And then comes the report that there was a Reverend, I think his name was Rob Schnick. I'm really bad with names. Schnick. He was quoted by the Times as saying that he had been informed weeks before the Hobby Lobby decision in 2014. That decision involved contraception and the religious rights and citing religious rights as far as employers covering contraception if that was something they were against. I hope I summarized that right. But this Reverend Schnick had dinner at the home of Supreme Court Justice Samuel Alito and his wife. Samuel Alito, by the way, wrote the Dobbs opinion, which reverses Roe versus Wade. And so this Reverend Schneck is an evangelical pastor, reverend, used to lead a nonprofit in Washington, and said that he specifically stated he had been informed of the ruling ahead of time. By who? We don't know yet. And so Schneck used his knowledge of that ruling to prepare public relations campaigns and tipped off the president of the Christian evangelical run craft store Hobby Lobby. By the way, don't shop at Hobby Lobby. They're the worst of the worst. And I can do a whole episode on that for you if you'd like me to. Go to Michael's, go to your local craft store, support small businesses. Don't shop at Hobby Lobby. But so there's a few things that comes out of this report, right? One, there's these leaks that's happening to wealthy individuals. And I say wealthy because what we know so far is that there's a serious campaign to wine and dine these justices. In fact, there was another report that came out that there was $30 million spent to wine and dine justices, right? What's interesting is that the court has nothing in place. And when I say the court, I mean the Supreme Court has nothing in place to exercise any authority to look at ethical problems. So a regular judge, a regular state court judge, even a federal judge at the district level, they're required to submit detailed financial disclosure reports, meaning you have to show if someone gave you a gift over, I think the limit is $250. It could be lower. You're required to submit a disclosure that you got that. And the reason for that is obvious corruption, right? Obvious bought and paid for. You don't want that with your judiciary. The Supreme Court, however, don't have to do this. And I did not know this before the report came out. I always assumed the Supreme Court had these same disclosure requirements as the lower courts do, right? It would only make sense. You're the highest court in the land. But they don't. So what has been happening is the Supreme Court they have not been revealing these gifts, quote unquote, these wining and dining. And the way they're getting around it is that they're claiming it's personal invitations, even if it's for people they don't know. So one example that came out was Justice Scalia, who is now passed, a very conservative judge, took about 80 hunting trips paid for by other people. He didn't disclose any of them. And the reason he didn't disclose any of them was because he had the owners of the resorts personally inviting him. Even though he didn't know these people, it was still considered a quote-unquote personal invitation. He took his sons with him. And, it's interesting that Scalia is the justice that this has come out about, right? Because he is a conservative judge. He touted ethics and morality. And, sometimes you read some of his opinions. And he came across holier than thou. And listen, justices kind of have to be, right? I mean, they're the arbiters of justice, of ethics, of morality. They are a vital element of our checks and balances. But if the Supreme Court doesn't have checks and balances within themselves, how is this being monitored? How do we know Justice Alito isn't being wined and dined, I'll use my words carefully, by these evangelical, Christian organizations to get the decisions they want? I mean, we just saw it in Dobbs this year. We see Christian national values coming into our case law when our Constitution says that shouldn't happen. So there has been a probe started. The House Judiciary Committee is conducting a probe. Senator Sheldon Whitehouse is chairing that probe. I don't know if you know Sheldon Whitehouse. He is brilliant. He is brilliant. If you've ever watched a committee meeting or a hearing and watched him cross-examine someone, it is ingenious. It's genius, I should say. The man is a brilliant, brilliant trial lawyer. He has a great cadence about him. He's wicked smart. He's been doing the work of service for such a long time. And I get, just geeked out watching him cross-examine some. I say cross-examine, it's really questioning in hearings, but he's brilliant at it. He's kind of one of the lawyers you want to be, when you quote unquote grow up. He just has a nice cadence, and it's just natural to him. For someone like me, I am very spirited. I'm a hot little island girl. And so when I try cases, I've got to watch the way I speak, make sure I'm not speaking too fast. It's a conscious decision, and he doesn't. Anyway, I digress. I just have a lot of respect for him. I like him a lot. He's been one of the senators who have just, done the work over the years and not looking for praise and not looking for higher positions and looking for power. He really is one of the people there working for us. And I appreciate him. So anyways, he's conducting this probe, and they're going to propose some legislation to put some essential ethics measures in place for the SCOTUS, which clearly is needed. I didn't even know wasn't there. So we'll see what comes out of that, and I'll update you on that. What else is going on? Oh, Trump's having a bad month or two, or maybe another year. We'll see. Right before Thanksgiving, the Supreme Court unanimously ruled that the Ways and Means Committee of the House were entitled to Trump's tax records from the IRS. And so that opinion was interesting because it was unanimous, right? And it was surprising, to be quite honest, that it was unanimous, because the Supreme Court has just done some strange things this year. So we didn't really know, which side it could come down on. I mean, listen, we knew what should have been done. We knew what's clear, but I'm happy that it was unanimous. I mean, even Uncle Ruckus, a.k.a. Justice Thomas, ruled for it. Maybe Ginny didn't get to him that day, but so it's going to be interesting. The IRS released the tax returns. The committee has the tax returns. Listen, I'm anticipating a bunch of losses being reported, some fraud. So we'll see what happens with that. Just yesterday, so I'm recording this on Friday, the 11th Circuit also hit Trump with a smackdown for his request for a special magistrate for the docs he had failed to return, aka stole, and that he had housed, aka hidden, at Mar-a-Lago. The 11th Circuit opinion, it wasn't a very long opinion. It was very short, but it was a smackdown. And that smackdown, so to give you an idea, when the 11th Circuit writes opinions, it's very detailed. It's very even keel. They usually try not to use harsh words, even when they're reversing a case. But this opinion was a little different. And I'll tell you this, the angst that this court, and it's a 3-panel court, had for the district judge, Aileen Cannon. I've got to be very careful how I continue this because I practice in the Southern District of Florida. I have cases, and I may have a case against Judge Cannon, or not in front of Judge Cannon in the future. So let me be very, very tempered with my commentary here. But Judge Cannon is a Trump-appointed judge. She's 35 years old, I think, inexperienced. Her writing is inexperienced. I'm actually going up to the 11th Circuit in a couple of weeks for oral arguments in a case that she also ruled on, and I'll give you an update on that after the hearing, and hopefully after we get a decision reversing her. But she really disregarded the law with regard to the decision she gave in that case. And really because she acknowledged that the law didn't require her to request for a special magistrate, but she did it anyways. And the 11th Circuit, again, unanimous decision, stated that she, quote, improperly exercised equitable jurisdiction. All right. And then they stated the entire proceeding should be dismissed. The entire proceeding was Trump asking for a special master over the documents that were obtained. Notably, the court said that regardless of the status of the document, of course, these were confidential, top secret documents. Okay. But the court said, the 11th Circuit said, regardless of the status of the document, whether it's a personal document, a presidential, a top secret one, the government maintains the authority to seize those documents under a warrant supported by probable cause. That has always been, you go get a warrant, you have to state probable cause in order to get that warrant. And so that the court said, this is the law of our land. In fact, the panel wrote, and I'm quoting here, "The law is clear. We cannot write a rule that allows any subject of a search warrant to block government investigations after the execution of a warrant, nor can we write a rule that allows only former presidents to do so," end quote. So what the court here said was, I don't care who you are. I don't care if you're the ex-president. The law of the land is the law of the land, and it shall be followed. And I cannot tell you how happy I am to see that smackdown, because that precedent is going to affect future cases going down the line. And I think the 11th Circuit, listen, they don't get it right all the time. I practice in this circuit. Let me tell you, I was a little surprised at this because they go out of their way sometimes to cover the district judges, even when they're wrong. So Trump's not having a good week. He actually dined with Nick Fuentes, a well-known white supremacist, and Kanye West. And then afterwards said he didn't know who Nick Fuentes was. I mean, as if the former president of the United States doesn't have people who are going to tell him who Nick Fuentes is. But he claims he didn't know who it was, blamed Kanye. I mean, Kanye should get blamed. Should we talk about Kanye? Kanye was at the dinner. Kanye has been spewing just the most egregious things that can come out of his mouth. And I keep trying to tell myself this man has a mental health problem. He's suffering from mental illness. We know he's bipolar, and whatever other disorders he may have. I keep trying to tell myself that, right? In order to try and rationalize what he's doing, but I can't. And it's just no excuse. It really is no excuse. I mean, yesterday, I think it was yesterday, he said he sees good in Nazis and good in all things. And he saw good things about Hitler. And it's like, are you kidding me? Listen, when Kanye said Black people chose to be slaves, when he's made comments against Black people, I kind of just wrote him off at that point. But now he's talking about other, minority groups, which is disgusting in itself. Is he doing it for attention? Probably. He went out last night saying, I guess, Kim Kardashian, he caught Kim Kardashian with Chris Paul, the basketball player. Poor Chris Paul. Chris Paul is just probably the nicest guy. Chris Paul was the head of the union for the NBA. He negotiated deals for them. I mean, he just seems to be the nice guy. I don't know him, obviously. Obviously, nobody's perfect. But for poor Chris Paul to get caught up in this, it's just horrific. So I hope Kanye gets the help he needs. It sucks. College Dropout is probably one of my favorite albums ever, and I can't, even when it comes on my playlist now, I just hit next and it sucks. Like he's on my, there's so many of his songs on my pre-trial hype list that I listen to in the car, and I can't listen to it anymore. But that's because I am unable to separate the music and the artist. I know some people can. I can have discussions and judge you on it, but I can't. I mean, I was the same with R. Kelly, right? Let's see, what else is going on? Oh, there was a railroad strike or potential railroad strike. So why were the railroad workers striking? So they, have bad working conditions. This is a little bit up my alley. I have to be a little bit tempered in how I speak about it. But the railroad workers don't even have sick leave. Like, they don't get any sick leave. They work 60 to 80 hours a week, right? And we're dependent on them. We're dependent on them to keep the railroads working. I mean, when we talk about supply chain, when we talk about inflation and all these things, all of those things trickle down to how are goods getting to your state. And most of the times it's railroad. I mean, here in Florida, we have shipping, but a lot of goods get to different parts of the United States via the rails. And so they have been trying to negotiate for almost 3 years to get a sick leave policy, right? And so there was this imminent strike. Senators passed a bill, was it yesterday or the day before? I can't remember, to basically force unions to accept a tentative agreement that was reached earlier this year between railroad managers and the workers, making the imminent strike illegal. And they did so without making any changes. And the vote for that was 80-15. Now, there was another bill that would have done the same thing, but offered to pay or offered to provide the I keep getting tripped up on that, railroad workers 7 days of sick leave. 7 days, right? That measure didn't pass. There was a 52-43 vote on that. Both measures, by the way, needed 60 votes to clear the Senate. So, I don't know what the problem is giving these railroad workers 7 days of sick leave for the year. I mean, what's crazy is that the people voting on these bills, Congress, each get, I think on average, it's 13 days sick leave per year. But yet they're voting against the workers asking for 7 days. I mean, and these are people working in hard conditions, right? I mean, snow, rain. I mean, these are the people getting this railroad running. And I mean, by all measures, Congress is not an easy job, but it's a cush job. You're in an office setting. You're in air conditioning. You're getting first class flights. You're working half of the year because some of you guys go on vacation all the time. It's just disgusting. It's disgusting. And, the labor unions have said that they're going to, the strike is imminent. They actually could strike as soon as December 9th. I mean, the bill really just sort of puts, it allows a tentative agreement. There was one personal day put in there that the Biden administration got in there. And I will say, I think this is a difficult decision for President Biden to sign. I'm sure, once it gets on his desk, I think he signed it already. Because he is very pro-labor. But, I think he was dealing with a difficult decision because the strike would have cost, close to 1 million jobs. It would have sent the U.S. into recession. So, I think he tried to get that one day in there, but, hopefully these workers get what they deserve. I want everyone to know, before you judge a strike, understand that strikes in this country by workers, by blue-collar workers, by labor unions, and I know there are pros and cons to unions. I get that. But it's why we have a minimum wage. It's why you have overtime pay. It's why you have a certain number of hours that you're legally required to work and not work. It's why you have weekends off in this country, right? And so a lot of people, I think, try to denigrate progressive policies, labor unions, but understand you have some of the rights you do today because of those people and because they went on strike and didn't work and couldn't eat and couldn't pay their rent and take care of their families for days, sometimes months on end, so that you could have the rights you have today. And so, let's pray for these railroad, why can't I say that word? Railroad workers, that they at least get the 7 days. I mean, it's the only human thing to do. With that, I'll end this episode. Thank you for joining me. On our next episode, I'm going to be talking a little bit more about the Dobbs decision and how it affects surrogacy and IVF. I'm going to have a special guest, a lawyer in that field, Sherry Fox. And so I hope you join me for that episode. As always, like and subscribe to my channel. Follow the Instagram page, please, and recommend to your friends. Thanks again, guys. See you soon.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed the show, please rate and recommend wherever you get your podcasts and tell a friend. You can also follow the podcast on our social media pages.